4, 3, 2, 1. 1 second. Live.
Good afternoon, everybody. Excellencies, colleagues, friends. It is great to have you all here. On Tuesday, we celebrated International Women's Day along with our sister agencies based here in Rome. And this year, Women's Day theme was Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. Now, we know that a sustainable future is only possible when all citizens are given equal access to opportunities and resources, and that zero hunger is only achievable alongside gender equality. But for gender equality to be sustainably achieved, everybody must do their part. And that's why we're having this event today. Gender inequality affects everyone, not just women, not just girls, everyone. And discriminatory gender roles assign responsibilities that contribute to inequalities. In many parts of the world, in many places, women are expected to be mothers, caretakers, and men are expected to be breadwinners and heads of households. Now, we all know that is unrealistic, unsustainable, and more importantly, it's unfair. Many women are heads of households and are helping to maintain families afloat thanks to their work, not only their unpaid care work at home, but their work and the income they bring in. So that means that everybody, all of us men also, should be involved in housework and caretaking activities. Now, when it comes to gender roles, all too often, violent attitudes are attached to masculinity. Men are somehow expected to be stronger, tougher, dominant, emotionless, and in control. So it's no surprise, therefore, that globally, men are the biggest perpetrators of all types of violence. Now, for these issues to end, we need to all be aware of the dangerous traits that can be assigned to masculinity and how these affect families, communities, and societies. We need to talk about how discriminatory gender roles also negatively affect us men and boys. And to do that, by creating spaces where these issues can be openly discussed. And that way we can begin to deconstruct these issues, these myths. And that's what we're doing here in WFP. Now, back in 2015, a small group of 24 men in WFP stood up in support of gender equality. Now, that group has now grown to over 1,700 men across 89 country offices and is called Men Stand for Gender Equality, or MS4GE, which is really a great thing. And I'm actually here today as one of the proud early members of the WFP Men Stand for Gender Equality. And since our group was founded, we know there are many other similar movements for the involvement of men in this fight for gender equality. Most notably, the global HeforShe movement created by UN Women, which launched a call for all men worldwide to do their part. And this movement was started by a very inspiring woman, Elizabeth Nehemiah. I hope I've spelled that right, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's journey is truly remarkable. As a small girl on the brink of starvation and malnourishment in a small village in Zimbabwe, she received food assistance from the UN. And this experience inspired her to become a UN worker herself and eventually bring positive change to the world. Elizabeth describes her journey from beneficiary to UN humanitarian in her book, I Am a Girl from Africa. And today we are honored here at WFP to be able to call Elizabeth one of our colleagues, and she's the reason behind today's important event. And we will hear about the impact her movement has had in communities around the world, and with a particularly inspiring example from Malawi. But I'm also very excited to announce the launch of the WFP Flock Men's Circles. Now, the WFP Flock is a global community of welcome and support created by our staff wellness division for all WFP and employees and their families, and has discussed many issues pertaining to our work, our personal lives, and our well-being. But the Flock Men's Circles will provide a dedicated safe space to support men in their growth by encouraging open discussions on the impact that prescribed gender roles have on their lives and the lives of their loved ones. Finally, today, we'll also hear a very moving testimony from an IFAD beneficiary in Uganda, whose life was changed thanks to a program using the Gender Action Learning System, which is a common methodology used by the Rome-based agencies. So today, the RBAs will be demonstrating the work that we are all doing internally and externally to promote sustainable change towards gender equality. We are not just talking, we are walking the talk. So it's my honor to be opening this event today, not only as WFP Deputy Executive Director, but as a man that is committed to doing his part in achieving gender equality. So thank you all for joining us today, and I hope that you continue to support us in our journey towards achieving zero hunger and gender equality. Now, I have often said and been heard to say that for every man-made problem, there is a woman-led solution. But today, the call is for us to find an all-led solution for this man-made problem. And with that, I'd like to pass the floor, and we are delighted to have with us His Excellency Ambassador Carlos Cherniak of Argentina, a permanent representative to the Rome-based agencies, but more importantly, a feminist. And with that, Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Ambassador, please.
Great. Thanks, Amir, for giving me the floor. Good afternoon, colleagues and distinguished guests. It's an honor for me to participate in this second event on the week of the International Women's Day. On Tuesday, we celebrated Women's Day, and it was clear that gender equality is a must to achieve a sustainable tomorrow, as stated in this year's theme. As Amir said, in order to achieve that objective, everybody has to do their part, because gender inequality affects everyone, not just women. I totally agree with that approach, of course, but I could say that those who especially need to do their part in order to achieve gender equality are the cis men. And how do we cis men actively do our part? By the acceptance of three principles: one descriptive, one prescriptive, and one practical. The descriptive is the one that can be tested statistically, which shows how in all societies women are in worse conditions than men. The prescriptive has to do with what is right and wrong, and with what we want to achieve in gender issues, making an assessment in terms of injustice. Following this reasoning, we could be recognizing that it is not fair that women are systematically worse off in all societies. Finally, the practical has to do with a political commitment, with doing everything in our power to try to prevent and reverse said injustice from all the places we occupy. Cis men, especially those in leadership positions, need to recognize its privileges in order to get rid of them. In this sense, following this rationale, if we deal with poverty, food security, and nutrition without taking gender differences into account, we are overlooking these strong disadvantages. In this way, making public policies neutral, not specifying of the most vulnerable and targeted by policies, is an insidious way of discriminating against women. If we recognize these three principles, we would find ourselves, cis men, embracing what feminism is all about these days. In fact, feminism not only brings inequality to surface and calls for its eradication, but they invite us to deep reflections seeking to subvert the naturalization of apparently impartial and fixed hierarchies and identities which threaten the democratization of society. Feminism doesn't seek the submission of men by the women, but to end any gender imbalance. Therefore, feminism is for everyone, and that's why in last executive board, I defined myself meeting as a feminist, like the ambassador of Netherlands, since feminism nowadays promotes a society where all people, including men, are freer, equal, with fewer ties based on gender mandates, with less violence. Thus, a sustainable future is only possible when all citizens are given equal access to opportunities and resources, and that zero hunger is only achievable alongside gender equality. It's important to highlight that Argentina, my country, has a strong commitment to gender equality and the promotion of women's rights, which is reflected in a national regulatory framework and cutting-edge public policies, and many of which are aimed to involve cis men in the gender equality conversation as its main advocates through the recognition of the three principles mentioned above. As an example, let me talk about a very important piece of legislation called the Micaela Law. This law is named after Micaela Garcia, a 21-year-old young woman from a province of Entre Rios in my country, who was the victim of femicide, and it established a mandatory training in gender and gender violence for all people who are civil servants in executive, legislative, and judicial branches of Argentina. The aim of this law is to transmit tools and deconstruct common meanings to fight against inequality and discrimination and transform the specific practices of everything we do as public servants and also with our homes. This is an opportunity to rank, training, and to incorporate a gender perspective throughout all the public policies in Argentina. Jointly with Micaela Law, Argentina promotes several policies and initiatives such as the movement Ni Una Menos, the program In Our Hands, addressed to rural women, and the National Action Plan Against Gender-Based Violence, that are oriented to promote perspectives beyond the normative cis-hetero approach in order to create a proper understanding and relevant actions concerning plurality and diversity. At the same time, the law is part of a broader set of international treaties and national laws. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discriminations Against Women, the Inter-American Convention to Prevent, Punish, and Eradicate Violence Against Women, Belém do Pará, 1994, the Yogyakarta Principles, the Law on Comprehensive Protection to Prevent, Punish, and Eradicate Violence Against Women in the areas in which they develop their interpersonal relationships, 2009, and Law on Gender Identity, 2012. In short, we have significant normative tools to achieve gender equality and autonomy. Although there is much work to do out there, we have robust instruments to start building equally on the ground. We should bear in mind that every single action counts. Avoiding micromachism, recognizing the importance of transversality, putting aside binary visions, and accepting diversity are ways to help to reshift our society. I humbly invite colleagues and management to implement these changes in their daily activities to become drivers of the Age March movement. Every one of our baby steps in deconstructing us is critical to show that equality matters, autonomy matters, and inclusion matters. Let's walk this path together. Let's do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Chedney. Thank you so much for giving us the example that your country is making and leading the way to gender equality. And thank you to the Deputy Executive Director as well for the introduction. I'm George Muammer. I'm head of the Library and Research Center here in the World Food Programme, and I'm another proud member of the MS4GE, Men Stand for Gender Equality. I'll be your moderator today for this very important event, and it's under the framework of the global HeforShe movement. We're very excited to host the founder of this movement, Elizabeth Nyamayaro, who is not only the famous author, but also our colleague and special advisor here at WFP. Born in Zimbabwe, Elizabeth has worked in the forefront of global development for over 2 decades, improving the lives of the underserved population and been instrumental in fighting global inequalities, advancing social justice and challenging the status quo to accelerate women's rights around the world. Through her leadership role at the World Bank, at the World Health Organization, UNAIDS, and UN Women. Elizabeth is a political scientist by training, holds an MSc in politics from the London School of Economics and political science and leadership education from Harvard Business School. Elizabeth wrote a memoir about her life and experiences. As has been said previously, I'm a Girl from Africa is a book that we have now copies here in WFP. So if you're a WFP staff, you can access the book through us, through the library. We have it on hardback. We have it in ebook version if you're in the field. If you're not in WFP, and to the whole audience, I invite you to use the link in the chat to purchase the book from Elizabeth's website. And otherwise, contact your library for the book. Interviewing Elizabeth today is another colleague, Michael Hamling. Michael is the head resource management for WFP Malawi. He's also the co-founder of Men Stand for Gender Equality, one of the original 24 men who started the movement in 2015. Michael has been an active supporter of gender equality for the last decade. He implemented the first resource allocation mechanism for gender activities in the UN and actively supported the White Ribbon campaign in Myanmar and recruited the first female driver for the UN in Myanmar. So I now pass the floor to Michael and Elizabeth for the interview. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, George, and welcome, Elizabeth, to this interview. I think it's a real pleasure that you're here today with us, and we're very humbled that we can call you our colleague in WFP. I'm calling you today from Lilongwe, Malawi, which is about 800 kilometers north from the village where you have been born in Zimbabwe. And when I read the book last year, I think it was a very inspiring story to see your journey from a small girl in Zimbabwe and receiving this food aid from a UN aid worker to your role in the UN Women and launching the HeforShe campaign. Before we will ask you some questions, Elizabeth, you have kindly agreed to read us a few lines from your book. So please, over to you, Elizabeth.
Sorry, Elizabeth, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you so much, DED, for the warm welcome, and Ambassador, thank you for your powerful remarks. It is truly an honor for me to be here today, and even a greatest honor to be part of the WFP team. I am going to read you a short passage from my book. I think it's a very quick setup. I grew up in this beautiful village in Zimbabwe, and we lived sustainably off our land. I never wanted for anything growing up because we had an abundance of crops because we grew everything together as part of this small community. But then sadly, when I turned 8 years old, we were really the first communities to experience the impacts of climate change. And so suddenly there was a severe drought in my village that left us with nothing to eat or drink. And one day I collapsed onto the ground. And I'm going to read a passage in terms of what happens next. And this is actually on page 1 for those who want to read along with me. Stand, I tell myself, but I cannot. I lie on my stomach, my legs stretched out, my arms limp at my sides, my palms tensed towards the heavens, begging for mercy. I burrow my fist deeper into the ground, seeking shelter from the scorching sun, yet the earth feels as hot as fire, practically sizzling beneath me. There is no cool or comfortable place to hide. The leaves of the tree are long gone, and with it the shade, bent away by the punishing drought that has descended on my small village in Zimbabwe. Rise, I think, but I cannot. I'm simply too weak to move. I am starving. I've had nothing to drink or eat for 3 days. My shrinking stomach growls like 2 hungry hyenas fighting over a goat. I'm so thirsty. It's as if tiny sharp razors slice the inside of my throat with each breath or attempt to swallow. I've never felt so hollow and wasted from hunger. I worry that the drought may never end and I will never leave this tree. I will die here, I think. But I'm too tired to be truly frightened. And so this was such a pivotal moment, but in this moment, when I was about to lose hope, a fellow African was an aid worker with the UN found me and saved my life, and this really was the moment that sparked my dream to become a humanitarian. And so I'm just really delighted to be here with you today.
Well, thank you so much for this. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hello. The first question which we have, Elizabeth, is what advice would you give to our male colleagues here on the call, what they can teach to their sons, their brothers, their nephews and their cousins to positively impact their mindset on gender equality?
I think I want to echo what the DD and the ambassador said, right? Children learn from watching the adults around them. And the best thing that you can do as a man in a community is to model positive masculinity. That means sitting down with the young boys in your life, explaining to them that gender equality is their issue too, explaining to them actually what the issues are, because I think young boys don't often know what the issues are. In fact, even some men don't know what the issues are. And we found this when we launched the HeforShe movement, that sometimes we had to explain to people why this involved them, because for so long we've seen this issue as a woman's issue led by women for women. And so I think, again, if we can start early, that is actually what's going to be transformative. So if you're a father, show them that, you know, parenting is a real job, and it's not something, you don't babysit your children, you parent your children, right? If you again have a spouse, make sure they see you sharing the responsibility around care, because we also know that there is the burden of care work is family placed on women. So the biggest thing we can do is to model positive masculinity around young kids and explain to them what role they have to play in all this.
Thank you so much for that response, Elizabeth. In your book, Elizabeth, you describe very well on sometimes how challenging it is to really measure and really show the progress in engaging men in gender equality and what this brings towards advancing in gender equality. With our team a few weeks ago, we went to a small village in Salama district. And I know in your book, you write in one of the chapters about how you worked with the president of Malawi and how he became a gender champion, and how he implemented the anti-child marriage law, and really to shift the focus for young girls to their education and really pursuing their professional dreams. And in our visit to this small village in Salima district, we interviewed the chief of that village, and he is a gender champion, and he really embraces this concept of Ubuntu, which I think you also in your book describe very well. And the program there at the primary school is supported by the Joint Program on Girls Education, JPGE, which is a collaboration between the Malawian government and UNICEF, UNFPA, and WFP. And we would like to show a small video from our visit to the village.
Ndidaganiza kuzasiya chisukulu chifukwa choti makolo anga ankakanga kulipira ndalama amayeso.
Ineyo ngati mfumu ndimalimbikitsa mafumu, ndimalimbikitsa makolo kuti tipange ana athu akazi kuti aphunzire pamalo pano. Mtsikana akaphunzira amakhala odzidalira, amakhala ndi kuthekera kotukula dera komanso kutukula dziko. Ndipo ndimapita kumudzi ndikukawalimbikitsa makolo ofoka.
Ndoza kuti ndi bwino kulimbikira sukulu samapusitsike ndi anyamata ena amene amakonda kucheni kusokoneza maphunziro atsikana.
Uchokera pamene takhala tikuwalimbikitsa anawo, papezeka kuti ana akazi ndi ambiri poposa anyamata. Pakati tunena pano ana akazi akhoza poposa mmene analili mbuyo.
Ndikadzamaliza sukulu ndimafuna ndidzakhale nesi chifukwa ndimafuna ndidzathandiza anthu odwala kuchipatala. Maphunziro sanyamata okha kundawo lino aliyense kuphatikizapo ndi atsikana.
The next question we have, Elizabeth, is what would you recommend? What can each and every one of us make in or to contribute to gender equality in their communities?
So first of all, that was such a powerful video, and I really like what you said in the video when you said gender equality is not possible without the involvement of men. This was really the impetus that we had with my colleagues at UN Women, because at some point we realized actually that we were constantly placing the burden on women to figure out how to achieve gender equality when it is a societal issue, and when men can actually play an active role. And in particular, even this issue of child marriage, it always resonates with me because it's some of the work that we did with my colleagues in Malawi at UN Women, and really making sure that the ownership was on men not to marry young girls, instead of placing the burden on girls to figure out how to escape a child marriage. So all I can say to this, I think, it's just that we all have a role to play, and the actions don't have to be too drastic. If you look around your own community, there is plenty of gender disparity issues that you can champion. So, and we see this with the chiefs in Malawi and the men in Malawi. I also share some examples in my memoir about what other men have done. There's a story out of Africa, a community where women were being raped when they went to fetch water. And then this man decided that he actually was going to create some HeforShe bodyguards and work with the women. I mean, he had daughters as well who had been subject to violence as they fetched water, and he would walk with them. But it was actually a really powerful story, because he then said, actually, I realized that since we're all working with the women, we're then able to bring back more water, so the women didn't have to go as often to fetch water. So there are these very small actions, and that the men in Zimbabwe started a husband school to address domestic violence. So all I can say is be active. There's so many issues that you can champion, but the one thing that we can't afford to do is not have men engaged in this issue.
Thank you so much for that response, Elizabeth. And the last question for today is, from your perspective, and this really goes out to everybody who's on this call, what can they say today, like one thing to their male colleagues to convince them to become a gender champion in their organization?
First of all, we need their participation, but also I will make this case to male colleagues who sometimes don't really understand why this is important, because again, we have positioned gender equality as a zero-sum game, right? That if women are now being promoted, it means that men are going to lose. And that's actually the opposite, because true equality benefits everyone, including men. And as humanitarians, as civil servants, our job is to solve some of the pressing inequalities, the biggest challenges facing our world. So what do you need for that? You need some very, very innovative solutions. Diverse teams equals more diverse voices, equals more diverse ideas, and hopefully better solutions to solve our the pressing inequalities. So it is actually a really, really important thing for us to be able to have women at the table, other genders at the table, also looking at the whole race and inclusivity, the intersectionality of all these issues, so that we can have as many diverse solutions to solve for the greatest challenges that we all face.
Thank you so much for that, Elizabeth. And it has been such a pleasure today, Elizabeth, talking to you. And we hope that Men Stand for Gender Equality and we can continue collaborating in the future. And we wish you really all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you, Michael. This has really been a great witness and a great story that we've heard, and it was a great video that we watched. So our next session will launch the new WFP Flock Men's Circles. With us presenting this initiative, we have Isabel, Family Liaison Officer, Staff Wellness, and leader of the WFP Flock, which stands for Family Liaison Outreach Community with or without kids. And we have Darko Petrovic, Vulnerability Analysis from Barbados Country Office, who is leading this initiative. Thank you so much for both of you, and over to you.
Thank you, George. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the speakers so far and to everyone who joined today. It's a huge pleasure and honor to be here talking about this crucial topic about how gender inequalities impact all of us in different ways and our planet, and of how the importance of men's role in creating a more inclusive world, inclusive society, and working on creating healthy masculinities. So, as George mentioned, I'm Isabel Rampa. I'm the Family Liaison Officer. I work with WFP employees and families globally on a wide range of family issues. And last year we created the WFP Flock, the Family Liaison Outreach Community with or without kids, who has launched lots of initiatives, programs, both globally and locally at country office levels. And one of these initiatives has actually been the WFP Flock Support Program. And these are peer support groups on specific topics that are led by volunteers, by WFP volunteers, and supported by WFP counselors. And it's in this context that I was actually contacted by Darko, and it's been an immense pleasure working closely with him, and then joined also by Men Stand for Gender Equality, Gender, and the counseling colleagues to actually launch this new initiative. So, Darko, welcome. Do you want to tell us a bit about what led you to contact me in the first place?
Hi, hi Isabel. Hi everyone, dear guests, dear participants in this event today. I'm really honored to be part of this initiative, and with no further ado, let me answer to your question. So, back in October, WFP Flock organized a webinar about infant and child loss. Now, this really resonated with me when I actually listened in, because my wife and we actually went through a similar experience. Just a year before that, we had a miscarriage, and that actually weighed on us quite heavily, both individually as well as on our relationship. And when I participated in a webinar, I actually learned two very important things in that. One, that men may cope differently and may experience differently such experiences like infant and child loss, but also that in those situations there seems to be a tendency that women, have all the support that they may need, or that that the support is more geared towards women than men, and so men may be more left behind in that process, in the process of grief, in the process of actually stomaching that experience. So both these observations really spoke to me, because my wife and I experienced something similar, and we also had different support systems. I felt, when I listened in, I felt very understood. I felt seen. I felt, that my experience too mattered, that I'm okay. And that there's nothing wrong with me. So I wrote you because this was quite inspiring. I wrote you to tell you about my experience, to tell you more about what I felt, what I went through, but also how the man circles in which I was at the time, how they helped me deal with this situation, and how they helped me really start processing that.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us, Darko. Can you tell us a bit more about what the men's circles are and how they helped you personally?
Yeah, so, well, as the name says, it's a circle in which men come together and they connect with each other. So it's basically a safe space in which men have the opportunity, the freedom to really talk about what's going on in their lives, about the struggles they're going through, about, the fears that they have. It's a space where they're invited to, when we are invited to be vulnerable and to be emotional, to connect with our feelings, and also to cry. So it's in a way an opportunity which allows a sense of self-reflection, but also self-expression. And that in itself can be a very healing and very supporting effect on us. Just the art of being vulnerable and opening up and being seen. So in that process, we also learn the art of authentic relating. So how can we communicate in ways that, you know, things come really from within, where we take off the mask, communicating in ways that is more loving, more kind, more compassionate, that, you know, creates space, and that is not including judgment, and that is not restrictive in that sense. So a much more, let's say, inclusive space. And so while doing that, we also grow. We also identify, or we also discover that we have resources within ourselves already, which we can tap into, and with which we can also support each other as peers, as friends, as colleagues, and which can inform and which can inspire also change at our level. So in that vein, it's encouraging us men to take, you know, responsibility for our own actions. It's a space in which we are also holding each other accountable, when we also learn the practice of accountability amongst ourselves. And it's a space where we also commit to change. So in that space, all of these things that I just mentioned, they help me, the men's circles help me precisely in that. And now I feel, I would say, much more complete and authentic, and, you know, ready to step into, you know, my step out of my shadow and into my power.
Thank you, Darko. You once told me that these men's circles also helped you get a wider understanding of gender roles and walk the talk. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, exactly. So to answer that question, I'll have to go a little bit back in time. And I'm actually happy to see Ambassador Czerniak of Argentina with us today, because it's actually with some experts of Argentina that my, let's say, story of feminism, of paying attention to gender equality really started. And here I'm not referring to the football or to the Pope, but I'm really referring to Argentine tango, to the dance. So, which I have started about 12 years ago. And by dancing tango, I have learned what it means to be in partnership with a woman, to create something together with her on an equal footing, to learn what it means to respect the space between us, to understand the energy flowing between us, to simply understand, you know, what it means to kind of be together and create something together. And given that, I have started to pay more attention to issues like partnership, like gender equality, feminism, and to the campaigns that have been, you know, made by WFP. Now, while this helped me support and advocate, you know, initiatives on women's empowerment, I also, you know, it also helped me become more aware that of my own disempowerment. So the emotional and relational shadow that I was living in for many years until very recently, you know, the shadow of a proud, strong, it was already alluded to today, you know, protective, powerful man. So much so that it was also, you know, the role of a lonely wolf. Proud, strong, protective, but yet lonely in your life, because you're not really used to being vulnerable and to opening. And so fast forward a few years later, when my life kind of started falling apart, when I discovered also my own experience of depression, when I looked for ways of healing those wounds from my childhood, from my life experiences, I discovered psychotherapy. And more importantly, I discovered the men's circles, and which actually became a game changer. So as I mentioned earlier, in those I was able to be more vulnerable, to open up, to relate, to be in the presence of men who also cared about their inner growth, about their inner work, about justice, about equality. And, opening up among other men is not something that comes naturally to many of us. It also didn't come very naturally to me either. But it was a very transformative experience, one in which I was able to grow. I was able to witness also the growth of others. I was able to connect to my inner being. And very importantly, in the context of this event today, I was able to connect more with my partner, with my wife, to relate to her, to be with her, to support her, to be able to really share the space with her on an equal footing, and not only with her but also with other men and women in my life. And so as a result of that, I can say that my relationships in general gained tremendously in depth because of that. And so to wrap up, for me, walking the talk actually means to where I actually found greater alignment between the concept of gender equality and the actual practice of that, and what it means, how it manifests itself in my daily life, in my daily actions, my words, my how I show up in the world. And so now I know that when I talk about gender equality, I know that I really mean it. It's not something, it's not just a lip service to something, or it's not something that is just fashionable or to please someone, but it's something really that is core. It's a core value and something that represents for me a partnership, the importance of a genuine partnership and of togetherness. So partnership and togetherness and gender equality, they're all for me something that just feels good and that feels right. And men's circles in that sense have been instrumental in helping me get to that point.
Thank you so much, Darko, for opening up with all of us. I think I can speak on behalf of all of us. And thank you for taking this initiative, which from the start, when you reached out to me, felt so meaningful and with the potential to actually change lives, which is what we're all about, right? So thank you, first of all. Thank you also to the colleagues in Gender, Mar, who supported this initiative from the very start, the colleagues from Men Stand for Gender Equality, Phil Georgiou from Counseling, who has been an active part as well in launching this pilot WFP Flock Men's Circle, which we're launching today. So as you might have seen, there's the form so that you can all register WFP employees and spouses to join the men's circles. And of course, we're available to support other organizations who might be interested in launching similar initiatives. Thank you, everyone. And over to you, George.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you, Darko, for sharing your experience. It's a very moving story and experience. It's important for men also to have these spaces for these types of conversations and work towards deconstructing negative internalized gender roles. So thank you very much to the staff wellness and Flock for taking on this initiative. I'll now pass the floor to Mar Echevarria from the Gender Office to introduce our very special guests.
Thank you, George. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the speakers for this fantastic event. So our next speaker is a very, very special guest. He is connecting to us all the way from Arua in Uganda. And we're really hoping that his connection works, but it might not work the entire way. So just in case, we do have a backup video, but we really wanted to give him the opportunity to tell his story live. So Mr. John Bosco is a husband, a father, and an active community member. He has inspired many members of his community, particularly men, and became the leader of a Men Changes group. Mr. Bosco participated in an EFAD project using the GALS methodology. It's a common methodology, as Amir stated earlier, that the 3 Rome-based agencies use, and it stands for the Gender Action Learning System, and it's a community-led empowerment methodology that uses principles of inclusion to improve income, food and nutrition security, of all people in a gender equitable or gender transformative way. So the GALS uses sort of participatory processes and diagram tools to enable household members to negotiate their needs and interests, to find innovative gender equitable solutions for livelihoods, plannings, and interventions, and for the overall improvement of the household. So thank you so much, Mr. Bosco, for joining us. It's such a pleasure to have you here. So I wanted to ask you, tell us about your experience. Where did you come across with the GALS methodology? What did it lead you to do? And how did that promote change, not only for you and your life, but for your household and your community? So please unmute yourself, Mr. Bosco, and the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely very happy talking to the whole world from my own village. And I'm also extremely very happy to share my experience with all the men across the globe. As already mentioned earlier, I came into contact with the Gender Action Learning Systems, the GALS methodology, through a funded project. And the project got me at a stage when I had a very critical problems in my household. And what I learned from the Gender Action Learning System, the GALS methodology, enabled me to move home. And when I reached home, I was now trying to find out how do I actually save my marriage, because I was at the verge of really separating and saying, no, I have to throw my towel, enough is enough. I did not actually realize that the problem was with me. So the Gender Action Learning Systems, that is the GALS methodology, enabled me to already begin to be inspired to do joint planning with my wife. And as I started the process, before I started the process, I was a serious monster. I need to confess to the whole world. Violence, fighting, insults, and quarreling was part of my menu, and it was on a daily basis. It was not something that I was about to leave, because I thought that my major problem at household level was my wife. And therefore, the GALS methodology, when it encouraged me to begin planning together with my wife, I discovered that my wife was a very intelligent actor in my own household development. And therefore, I'm very happy. And men, I want to announce to you, I did not lose the gold that I was staying with. And that is my wife. I am inspired. I want to say, at that particular time, we had stayed with my wife for 4 months without talking to one another. Time reached when we even wanted to separate. You just want to sleep in the bed, and when the body of your wife touches you, you want to move away. And that is the stage where we reached. And our connecting point was only our children. They are now engaging and trying to realize that actually we need to work together. After the Gender Action Learning System, the GALS methodology, did some bit of work in my attitude. You remember this attitude, men, has been built over a long period of time by our traditions. The way the gender, roles actually shape us. This is a long journey, and therefore it is something that needs to be done in a very systematized and a slow process with a lot of patience. Now, what happened is that when I started doing this joint, planning with my wife at household level, I started picking on some of the role, because I realized that I also was one of the victims of gender inequality. And that actually turned and made a U-turn in my life. I realized that I was not able to share domestic work at household level. I couldn't wash my clothes. I couldn't fetch water. I couldn't wash the clothes of my own children. But when I started off and having this kind of a joint working and together with my wife, I realized, I want to tell you now, you would see me a very healthy man. Some 20 years ago, I had a very terrible journey. You would not see me. I'm a very healthy man now, very healthy. And therefore, the journey that made me turn around really is the things that took me off. Now, when I started washing clothes, I started taking some of the domestic chores with my wife. One thing, I'm closer to the roadside. Now, many of the women who would go to fetch water and even, fetch firewood, of course, without their men, were looking at me. I was wondering, what wrong have I done? Because they would line up and trying to see what am I doing. in my own, mind, I said, I think these women are laughing at me. And I think probably they're saying his mind has been pocketed by the wife. So at one point I said, I need to put a fence so that I do this work when I'm in an enclosure. But little had I not known that these women were carrying a very important message 1 or 2 months down the road after my persistence to continuously, carry out with the domestic chores, cook food, wash plates, and even, fetch firewood. The women's men started coming to me. Bosco, what is it that you're doing at your household level? That my wife tells me that they wish all the men were like you. I said, wow, wait a moment. This is great. This is great. And shortly, I've seen men beginning to come to me. And I had to introduce the men to the girls' methodology and said, actually, if you want to be in a happy life at your household level, this is the way to go. And that started spanning. I took much of my time to give this kind of happiness to the men because I became very happy. And I even felt that, by the way, if God forbid, and if God would plan something, I should even leave before my wife. Unfortunately, I do not know what God has planned for me and my wife, because I realized that my wife would take care of my children and other people much better than I do. And therefore, most of the men became inspired. We started working together. They would come to my household. I want to tell you, with that change of that journey, a lot of things has happened in my life and in the life of many men. Actually, in the 8 districts of West Nile, we have 1,513 men's movement. Unfortunately, this is a social movement. We interact. We really try to, come together, share our experiences, and our inspirations has changed quite a number of men who are actually, every other time making attributions, bringing their experiences, and many of the men are actually, picking up on this. And I must say, this is a cross-section of men, working men, even the men who are in rural areas, those who used to drink continuously, those who would not even, take any domestic chores are all on board, and they have lived a very happy life that I really must share with many of you on this very great day and this very occasion. I must thank World Food Program for having discovered us. We are silent movers, and we have really moved together with many, but what makes us very happy is that the inspirations and the joy that we have in ourselves. I'm 50 years old now, but I want to tell you that I still have more life to live. And if I had continued with gender inequality, believe me or not, I think I would perish in not more than 10 years from now, because my life has changed a lot. And my own thinking was, my wife was a problem to everything I had in my community. I was thinking my wife was a problem to my tribe mates. My wife was a problem to my extended family. My wife was a problem to everything, anything that happens at household level. But I must tell you that I realized that my wife is the gold in everything of all that I was thinking before the girls' methodology. And therefore, I really have a lot of things that has changed in my life. One, I'm living a healthy life, like many other men who are there. Two, my children are living happily. Let me tell you, my children were traumatized. They were traumatized at household level, because then we were like monsters with my wife. Imagine for 4 months that we did not talk to one another. What happened? My children completely went mute. And some of them, even in schools, they were asked, are they deaf? Do they know how to talk? And that is the effect that I created in my household level before the gender action learning systems. And therefore, I really feel much inspired because I'm very healthy, and I have inspired 1,513 men. I think even when I really move out, because this men changers group have moved, and I'm telling you, if you get in touch with these men and get their videos, you would say, I think, Bosco, you have lived a life that has a social life that really has inspired many men and has changed quite a number of things. One thing I've discovered, that many things that the women actually do, they do it for the betterment of the society. And therefore, we as men need to give them the space to do what is required. And therefore, because at even one point, I used to monitor my wife. Has he come here? At what time was he here? Now, I became a keeper. And you know how much time I was being constrained to follow up. Where has he passed? What happened? And what is happening? Has he talked to any other men? I mean, that as itself alone really feels me. But I must say, I'm a relaxed person, and I'm very proud of what the gender action learning system has done to me, and even to many of the men who are actually able to, becomes, changers of these processes. We have not registered this social movement, but we think we can do much more with this kind of approach and change many of the men to become happier. Recently, just during the women, celebration on 8th, I received over 400 men in my home. And these 400 men actually came, and I was able to prepare for them food, and we were able to eat together, serve them, and everybody was extremely happy. One of my child, that is my elderly boy, prepared for us plow, and that many of the women say this is the best plow they have ever had. From is a university student, but that is the way to go. And I felt one time I called my mother and said, my mother, you know what, you almost misled me, and I was going to die, but thank and glory be to God that you allowed me a space to marry this golden woman who has actually turned around my life, and I believe we shall be able to continue and journey together in this process. Therefore, my general call to all the men on the globe is that we can do more. And therefore, our attitudes has been built over a long period of time, but we can do something about it, and we can make ourselves happy. Many of us do not cry, but I tell you, internally we are finished, because you are there compacted, and you are stressed with a number of things. You are stressing your internal organs, and therefore, for me, I'm relaxed and I'm happy. And whether I do have or I do not have, the men that I've inspired will live to tell our story in our family. I'm very happy, and I'm sorry that I was not able to be with my wife. I actually had smuggled my wife. Unfortunately, we have lost a relative, and therefore at this particular point, I wouldn't have been here. I would have loved to be with my wife beside me, because to confirm whatever happiness that we have, and also to confirm to you the photos that we had before these inspirations. I'm extremely happy to share with the whole world, men, we can make a step and change the whole world to become a happier life if we can move from gender inequality and turn to gender equality. That will make all of us, and even our children and generation, to be very happy. I'm extremely very happy for this process, and I'm also very extremely happy for this discovery that World Food Programs and were able to discover us, that we are doing a great job, and we shall continue to do it, because our capital is a social capital. Thank you very much, and I call upon all the men to take up this mantle and fight this monster called gender inequality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bosco. That is so powerful, and we're so happy to be able to have you here sharing your story. So thank you. I'll now pass the floor over back to George.
Thank you, Mr. Bosco, and thank you, Mr. Bosco. That was a very incredible story and witness from you. So at this point, I open the floor for questions. So we have some questions actually that came through in the chat. So question number one, I think Deputy Executive Director, this one is for you. How do we ensure that as we promote the girl child, we do not disempower the boy child in the process? Amir?
Thanks, and John, Asante Sana, that was really, really, really good stuff. Thank you. I think what we have to really, really understand here is that we are empowering the next generation. We're empowering all children, and that that empowerment isn't about empowering a girl versus empowering a boy. It's empowering the next generation, because that's how we will make the proper change. And I think change is going to be generational. Yeah, I mean, and I know that like for myself, I have two sons, and those two sons now have children themselves. They're babies, or their babies are starting to grow. But my sons, both of them, have change nappies, they cook dinner, they're doing their part of the work at home, the laundry, and I've watched them, and I think they did far more. I mean, I like to feel that I was reasonably engaged and involved, but when I see what they do in their homes, almost puts me to shame, I think, as how little I probably did. I thought I did a lot, but when I see what they do, and I certainly feel that their sons will be even better men. So it's very generational. You know, we need to make sure that as little boys learn, they're not seeing this as being done in spite of them missing out because the girls are getting what they need. In fact, they have to see that, I think as John Bosco was saying, it's a better society. It's just better all around. And I think, I think what we have to make sure is that little boys, as you just said, they don't feel that it's done at their expense, that actually they now are getting far more out of society because they're all together in this. And so I think which is why I think it's going to be very important as we move on and make this sustainable, as societies become more equitable, more equal, that we have boys, little boys in particular, understand that this is the better society. It's better for them. And I think, John as Bosco has given us a lot of thoughts on this about how this is now a better place. And I think that's, for me, is how we do it. It's through explaining things better, just making sure that everyone is, that as we do this, they're comfortable, and we actually have to have the, when we are teaching them these better traits, that they understand how to do this better, that they really want to do this, and there have to be many ways that the experts can help us with this, but it is about a generational change. I don't think we should expect these results just in one generation, but if we don't do this now, start really now properly, we will have missed a huge opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you. And Darko, you wanted to also add some words?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Amir, really for sharing this. Actually, I'm also very moved when you mentioned about, boys and empowering them, empowering the next generation. I think what I learned from my experience, which I would like to share, is that we also need to deal with the issue of trauma in that sense. So when we want to empower the next generation, we also need to look into how, both girls and boys have been disempowered, and what has actually happened to them or to us, starting with ourselves in our childhood. What has happened to us that actually prevented us from, being more open or more vulnerable or achieving certain, things in life, be it a girl or boy, but also what did not happen for us. So the lack of maybe connection, the lack of presence, the lack of attachment that was healthy. And so while we look towards empowering the next generation, I think what is very important for us as parents or parents to be is how trauma at every single day level, at micro level, has been influencing our childhood, and how we can learn from this to actually truly and fully and in a very wholesome way can actually do this empowerment of both boys and girls. And I'm sure that in that sense we would be on a good path. Thank you.
Thank you, Darko. Next question, Elizabeth. Can I ask this one to you? Next question, as many households are led by women, how can these women teach their sons which are the men of the future to respect women?
I mean, so first of all, it's not just, am I live?
Yes.
I'm having issues with my connection. So, I mean, I think first of all, it is really important too that it is not seen as a woman's issue to just raise a son. I think Darko has explained to us just how important it is, right? That both partners are involved in raising that child. And again, I think most boys are constantly looking to their fathers for role models or the men in their lives, their uncles in their lives. And so, you know, it is absolutely important that this is a shared responsibility. But I also think, you know, very simple things that we often do as parents is that we actually start this issue of gender inequality in the household by leaning into stereotypes. You know, you see that a parent who has a boy and a girl, when they're buying toys for them, it's very much genderized, right? The boy has the truck, the girl has the dolls, and the girl was taught to take care of her brother. And I think we can do a lot of that teaching right at the household level as parents, whether you're a single parent or you're a couple doing it together. And it's something that is really critically important, because by the time they leave home, they've already learned what these sort of set gender norms look like. And I think we need to deconstruct that. I think we need to liberate you know, both genders and all genders to be able to express themselves in a healthy way. Because again, when boys aren't able, and again, Darko, you said it so perfectly, you know, when you're not able to express emotions in a healthy way, and then it manifests into anger, right, into aggression or into depression. And we know that, you know, the leading cause of death among men in the UK is suicide. So this gender inequality isn't benefiting anyone. And we all need to work towards our true equality, because it liberates all of us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Next question for Isabel. Question is, awesome testimony on men's circles and their transformational power. Since many men find it hard to even join such activities, how is WFP going to encourage men to join the circles? Isabel?
Thanks, George, and thank you for asking the question. So the Flock men's circles, as I was saying, this is a pilot project, so we're going to start with one circle, and then we rely a lot on the participants' engagement, actually. And I think that it's something that we're hoping we'll see will, you know, go by word of mouth, by men participating in the circles, some of them wanting to maybe start facilitating circles themselves. And little by little, this is you know, a project, an initiative that can grow, that can become also local in certain countries, that we can then have in different languages, available hopefully one day in French and Spanish, etc. Right? Maybe in Arabic. So you know, this is a pilot. We're starting small. Anyway, one group can't be huge. We have a great, you know, core team willing to engage in doing this with Darko, and then little by little we will see how this grows with the whole Flock support network. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.
And George, if I could just offer both to Isabel and Darko, if they'd invite me, I'd love to attend one.
Thank you, Amir. We would love to have you there. That would be amazing. I won't be there because it's a men's circles only, but very, very happy for you to join. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for John Bosco. I have a question for Mr. Bosco. Thank you so much for the story you shared. What was the process and the ideas that stuck to you most during the GALS program and that made you change your mind towards gender equality? What are the sentences, if any, that you think might change men's minds? Thanks.
So Mr. Bosco.
Yeah, thank you very much, George, for bringing out that question, and I also thank the person who asked the question. Really, the process that started with the gender action learning systems was right from, of course, using the tools like the Vision Road Journey, which is for planning. And that enabled me, because initially I was planning alone at household level. So when these tools offered me an opportunity to already begin, first of all, thinking about myself, but also thinking about my family, and then saw that this process would lead me to something else. Of course, by that time, there was even not a lot in my mind that this is actually an approach which is going to change issues of gender inequality. But of course, I thought that it was important that I really do joint planning with my family at household level, because everybody has a contribution to make. And that process led me into also looking into the roles of that we play. I myself play at household level. My wife and the children play at household level. And that is using the gender balance tree. So these processes now took me into this joint planning process, and I discovered that my wife and the children had a lot to offer. I was always disturbing myself, actually, you know, planning for people who actually have brain, who would actually contribute quite immensely. And that alone took me into, you know, the issues of joint planning, and the joint planning process took me into the issues of the roles that each one of us can play that makes us actually, you know, live amicably. And that took me into the issues of decision making, because I used to make decisions alone for my family, and I was thinking my decision was the right one. And at any one point, I discovered that I was now the one taking leadership at my household level. And therefore, since I was taking the leadership, then my whole household became actually the question, and I became the answer. Because every time there is something, they now ask. And therefore, I must provide the answer. I got tired and fatigued. And by the time I saw we had a joint planning and look at the roles and the decision making, and the leadership was, you know, provided, and my wife would take leadership, and anytime I also take leadership, I would cook. When my wife is not there, I would prepare this. The children feel comfortable as if their mother is present. I remember at one point, my small boy was calling me mommy. I was wondering. He was saying, mommy. I was saying, but I'm daddy. No, he continuously kept on calling me daddy. And I want to probe him further, because he's growing. I really kept on probing him why he is calling me actually mommy. And one time he told me that you provide all what actually mama was providing. And therefore, it was inevitable that I call you mommy. And therefore, he even called mommy now daddy. He called daddy mommy. So all these kind of mix, we felt very, happy at household level. And therefore, I felt that that was a release of excess of, things that I would have actually do alone. So that is, for me, the process. Of course, the tools that took me into the household, and then it generated, some kind of harmony. And from the harmony, people are able to see, and it went out, because it was a tool that came and entered in my household and did not remain there. It went out of my household, and therefore the experience went out to the other people. And the other people, again, did not keep it there. It has to go out, because the moment people see in you and say, what happened? Why have you changed? You used to be a fighter every other day. What has happened? They ask your wife, and they ask me, and they even ask the children, and therefore we release for them what is required to change their life as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you, John. Thank you very much for this. So last question for the ambassador. How can we promote other leaders, particularly in Latin America, to take a public stand in favor of feminism?
Ahí está. Sí, lo escuchamos. Oh, no, we don't hear you. Ahora sí.
Okay, let me say first that really I'm very, very happy to be part of this event. And of course, I would like to say that I really appreciate whatever I hear here, and it's enriched my vision and my perspective. So thank you all of the speakers and also the colleagues from WFP. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Mar. Thank you all. But in particular, about the question, I could say that in life, what is important is to be coherent. So it's important that what you do, what you speak, what you express, you need to put in practice. It's necessary to be much more people that what are saying is what they are doing. And of course, it's important to try to give examples, to provide examples, to show other people with practices what is the meaning of to defend the concepts and the principles that we are mentioning. I could say that also it's important to try to visualize what is not visible. Sometimes when we use concepts, sometimes I could say new concepts. For example, I expressed cis men. I said that during the executive board, and was, you know, many colleagues asked me about that. So it's great because you are breaking the ice using concepts that try to visualize what is not clearly visible. And this is a way of creating a discussion, to create a possibility to exchange views and to try to make other colleagues to be open-minded. Of course, my dear colleagues, it's necessary to respect. There are different cultures, different traditions, and I don't want to impose any kind of values, perceptions, or ideas, because I'm coming from a country that have particular policy about that. We are trying to be champion in many of these policies, but we understand that there are many cultures, and you know, till the next week, I will stay as a chair of the G77 plus China. And you know the heterogeneity that we can find in the G77. And I respect all my colleagues, and all my colleagues know perfectly well that when I speak from my perspective, I try to put aside my representation and my chairmanship from the G77, because I know that many colleagues don't agree with many of my visions and perceptions. So, but when I speak from Argentina and I speak with my heart and I speak with my vision, I also ask my colleagues to be respected, because it's my way, it's our way of thinking in my country. So the key point here is to try to understand that all of us has to be to start a process of discontracting, and to not to be afraid of that, because it's important to be open-minded, to rethink what we learn from our history. We have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to become students, to try to learn from all of you, and I think that this is the only way. There's not a particular way. The only way is to, I could say, to have time to try to sit down, to have conversation, to exchange views, not to impose values, but try to express and to try to motivate this very, I could say, challenging process of to start to be discontracting. So thank you very much, and I don't know if I could answer the question, but I think that this is a starting point to go on working on that. And I'm sure that in WFP we will have the opportunity to promote and to discuss this issue during my tenure in the Bureau. So thank you very much, Amir, and thank you all my colleagues to have the honor to be part of this event. Thank you.
And thank you. Thanks to you, Ambassador. That was a great reply to the question. And so now for the closing remarks, well, of course, I want to thank everybody for joining before this and thank everyone for participating. The closing remarks are from the FAO Women's Committee, Angelica Maria Jacome Daza. Apologies for the pronunciation. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to speak on behalf of the FAO Women's Committee at this important event organized as part of a series of activities to celebrate International Women's Day. Today's event focuses on how gender equality can contribute to achieve a sustainable tomorrow, and specifically, how we as the Rome-based agencies can support positive change towards sustainable gender equality. Closing the gender gap in agri-food systems is essential to eradicate hunger, all forms of malnutrition and poverty, as well as to achieve the broader Agenda 2030. Decreasing the gender gap in access to resources, services, and opportunities will lead to an increase in agricultural outputs, benefiting both women, men, as well as communities and countries. But evidence shows that more than 928 million people globally do not have enough to eat. The gender gap and the prevalence of moderate or severe food insecurity has increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. The gender gap is greater for the poorest, less educated, those out of the workforce, widowed, or living in the suburbs of large cities. So what are some of the positive changes and solutions that we, as development actors, can bring to the table for a sustainable and equal future for all? One solution is to address the root causes of gender inequalities globally. Given that gender inequality is important for all, as highlighted by Elizabeth, we all have a role to play. Men need to actively engage and promote gender equality. If we fail to tackle these challenges, gender inequalities will prevail. Initiatives such as the Men's Circle do not only provide men with the opportunity and resources needed to become effective agents for change, it also provides a safe space for men to connect with each other, strengthen their capacity to relate and engage on gender equality, conflict resolution, and to strategize on changing gender norms that are holding us back. DARCO's heartfelt intervention is a good case in point. At the same time, as stressed by Ambassador Cherniak, we should not perceive traditional beliefs as only barriers to gender equality, but also as powerful tools to achieve gender equality and empower women, learning from each other. In this respect, FAO has been promoting the use of community engagement and empowerment approaches to achieve behavioral changes and address social gender norms. One example is the FAO Demetra Clubs, a community-led approach that has proved powerful in engaging both men and women in areas usually considered the exclusive domain of women, hence contributing to changes people's behavior on diets, food taboos, agricultural practices, and choices of crops. The Rome-based agencies, with the support of the European Union, are also currently implementing the Joint Program on Gender Transformative Approaches for Food Security, Improved Nutrition, and Sustainable Agriculture. This program is an innovative initiative which aims to tackle the root causes of gender inequality and trigger transformative change. The program is supported by the Rome-based agencies and their partners to embed gender transformative approaches in their policy dialogues, programs, working modalities, and institutional cultures. Closing the gender gap in agri-food systems requires holistic, integrated, and continued efforts in working with women and men together at all levels to shift attitudes, practices, and beliefs for more equitable relationships on the individual, interpersonal, community, and organizational levels. Finally, I wish to thank all the speakers from WFP EFAT, as well as His Excellency Carlos Cherniak, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Argentina to the Rome-based agencies, for their valuable contributions during this event, as well as their powerful statements and commitments. I also wish to congratulate WFP on their Flock Men's Circles that is created by men for men. It is time to break down the gender silos. We need more allies. We need more supporters because we are stronger together. Gender equality is important for all of us. Achieving it, as highlighted by Bosco, means we all win. Thank you, and count on FAO to achieve gender equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We're ending the event now.
Thank you, everyone, for this event, and I wish you all a great evening. Thank you. Goodbye.